episode 162. This is a weekly diary podcast hosted by me, Rayz Dayz. This is my diary podcast. As I like to do at the end of every episode of Rayz Dayz, I want to talk about something I'm thankful for. And it's kind of surprising because I've been depressed. No desire to watch what I had been watching in the background, Star Trek. I think I mentioned this last week. And last Sunday when I was producing everything, and I think also because I just watched Bupkis, which is Pete Davidson's new show. I'm a fan of Pete Davidson. Never seen him on SNL, which blows some people's minds that I only know him from his stand-up and movies that he's been in. But I am a fan of his, and I enjoyed Bupkis. I decided to start watching Saturday Night Live, and that is what I am thankful for this week. I am thankful for Saturday Night Live. I put it on as the background show as I was editing last week, and it's kind of been the show that I've put on because it's something I don't have to focus on. It's funny. I actually started watching episodes from the 90s because that was when I last watched Saturday Night Live. Growing up as a teenager, I would go over to my friend's house and we would stay up late to watch Saturday Night Live, and it's kind of a time machine to go. They're all on Peacock, obviously, which Bupkis is as well. So I started watching Saturday Night Live from the 90s, and takes me back. It's kind of like, obviously I would love to be back in the 90s. It's kind of one of the things, realistically may not want to be back in the 90s, but like there's that romantic ideal of the 90s, growing up in the 90s, being a teenager in the 90s, and just knowing how much easier life was back then. And how, even though in the 90s was, I was in middle school in the 90s, that was one of the heights of depression. One of the first times that I can remember where I had suicidal thoughts was in middle school. So that existed in the 90s, but that's not what I'm thinking about when I think about the 90s. I'm just thinking about the Chicago Bulls. I'm thinking about the movies that came out, the TV shows that were on, and staying up late at my friend's house to watch Saturday Night Live. And that's what watching this show has brought me back to. And I watched a bunch of them in the 90s. The bummer is none of the musical acts are on because, of course, they would have to renegotiate contracts with all the musicians. So that is a major bummer in watching these, because I was also looking forward to watching some of the performances of bands, the music of the 90s. Love that. So that's not in there, but watched a bunch of that. And last night before last, I started watching. I was like, well, the whole reason I'm doing this is because Pete Davidson. So it's like, I looked up, when did Pete Davidson start? Is I think November of 2014. And apparently he's the longest running cast member on the show, which is crazy. So I went to November of 2014 and started watching. And I never watched then. 2014, are you crazy? I literally, probably the last time I watched Saturday Night Live was probably like 1998. Actually, no, I remember when I was working at Blockbuster, I went over to my same friend, to like have beers after work. So I was 21, so probably 2000, around there. 2000, no, I guess that would be 2002 is probably when I stopped watching. And then, so 14 years into the future. So, and then watching 2014, hilarious. I was so surprised, so much funnier. I mean, even though the iconic people that were in the 90s, and like seeing the politics that they talked about in the 90s is crazy, that like nothing has changed politically really in this country. But the cast of the 90s was, you had Wayne's World first off. So you had Michael Myers, Adam Sandler, Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, Kevin Nealon, Chris Rock, Rob Schneider, Tim Meadows, David Spade, Chris Farley, Al Franken, like epic comedic actors. And then I go to 2014 and it's funnier. I think the performers are better, but I don't know any of the performers. I think Michael Shea, one of the news updates guys, I saw one of his stand-up specials. I like that. Obviously, I've seen, God, what's her name? The one that does the voices. There's a couple that I've seen in movies. But, like, I'm actually, and then seeing Pete Davis, who looks young. The dude's young in this, in 2014. It's like, Jesus. So I'm enjoying watching the newer seasons, which my whole, like, ignorant bias with SNL was, like, it wasn't funny. Like, why would, like, because I never hear, I got really into stand-up comedy, watching stand-up comedians in the late 2000s, right? 2000 and 2008. Started watching a lot of stand-up comedy. I started, getting stand-ups on my podcast, friends with comedians, all that kind of stuff. Up through the pandemic when I was like, whoa, so many comedians are just leaning right wing. And I just you never hear comics say anything good about Saturday Night Live. And I'm sure a lot of that is because they're jealous they're not on the show. There's a lot of, like, bitter jealousy in the comedy world. So I don't know. I had always had this, like, this idea that it wasn't funny. And I never watched any recent stuff. And now going into these recent things, like, there's still stuff that's not that great. It is live, so people mess up. Some skits don't work that well, but, like, I really did enjoy it. And it's also updated references instead of the 90s. Like, I definitely get more of the references because there's stuff from the 90s. I mean, I was a teenager. I didn't know everything that was going on politically then. I didn't know a lot of the adult things that were happening in the news in the 90s. So I definitely relate to the stuff in 2014 more. But yeah, it's so my background show, what I'm going to put on, because I can't watch movies I'm going to review while I work because I need to watch it. I can't do that. So I have background shows. So my new background show that I'm thankful for, because it provides me with a lighter show, comedy, as opposed to Star Trek, is Saturday Night Live. So I'm thankful for Saturday Night Live. I'm also thankful for the opportunity to connect with all of you through this podcast and for the chance to share my journey with you. Please join the conversation by leaving a comment or rating on your favorite podcast platform or over on youtube.com/inspireddisorder if you are watching these episodes. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next week, next Saturday specifically, for another episode of Rayz Dayz.
New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere our podcasts are found. Binge the full week over at inspireddisorder.com/plus. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.